the bombings. So we have held and participated in vigils, in online events, in many other activities. We advocate for nuclear disarmament. We follow Pope Francis and other hierarchs and believes nuclear weapons are immoral and sinful and actively work towards their elimination. We have taken part of the international campaign to abolish nuclear weapons, ICANN, when we are co-hosted today, co-sponsored today this webinar. We engage for many years with survivors through our partners in Japan, in other regions, to listening to their stories and to listen to the experiences and to educate others about the devastating impact of nuclear weapons. And of course, as a Catholic peace movement, we promote peace. We have been witnesses of this Hiroshima and Nagasaki product of a bombing with listening to their voices, emphasizing the need to learn from the past and work toward a more peaceful future. So we work with other organizations as ICANN and other networks in Geneva, our representatives in many places. So we continue in this path, accompany the people in Japan, accompany the people everywhere to promote a peaceful world. So I will be welcoming our facilitator to this journey, my colleague, Jonathan Frears.
Thank you, Martinez. It's our first privilege, I believe, to hear from Bishop Marc Stanger.
Hello.
Welcome, Bishop.
You hear me?
Yes, we can hear you well.
Yes. I will pray, no?
Your voice is very clear.
Yeah. I pray. Lord, in such a moment of darkness, help us to put faith in your promise that you will not leave, not forsake us. We ask you to make your presence known to the hungry, the displaced, the suffering in Gaza, strengthen the weary, comfort the mourning, and stir the hearts all for all who still believe in freedom. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Bishop. Wonderful way for us to begin this time together. We turn also now to Sister Teresa Waimui-Wiachira, the Pax Christi International co-president, and excuse me for stumbling on your wonderful name. I'm not hearing.
I'm muted.
There.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I'm saying it's okay. Many people still cannot pronounce my name, but you have tried. Julia, somebody about to display, or I read from what I have, my prayer, my reflection. Okay. Let me read it from my side.
Yeah, I don't see it.
Okay, I can read it from my side. Okay. Lest we forget. Today, we gather together, not only to remember, but to reflect and ask ourselves very deep questions that should emanate from the core of our being. What did we learn? What have we learned? Need to learn, must learn from the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki? Is it just an event that happened 80 years ago? No. Millions of people lost their lives, were maimed, traumatized, and continue to suffer from that one event 80 years ago. the environment, and all the other living things were affected too and are still affected today. Whatever happened 80 years ago in these two places cannot be allowed to be forgotten. That is why today we gather together to remember, to reflect on our shared moral responsibility and renew our commitment to building a more just, peaceful, and nuclear-free world. We are grateful today that we will listen to testimonies, reflections, and shared witness, and at the same time experience the enduring impact of nuclear weapons. We will be uniting with Pope Leo XIV, our Holy Father, on the call and urge to stop the tragedy of war. Also to reflect on the irreversible dire consequences of war that cannot compensate the pain of mothers, fears of children, and stolen future. We indeed have no choice. But to adhere to this call, to a disarmament grounded in non-violence and human dignity. As non-violent peacemakers, we mark this day with gratitude that we can gather to speak in one voice against any weapons of mass destruction, use of violence as a means of peace. We therefore commit ourselves to building a more just, peaceful world through embracing the gospel of non-violence. May our Creator God, who came that all may have life and have it more abundantly, be with us today and in the next 80 years of building bridges for peace. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Sister Waimuyu.
Welcome, Jonathan.
We're off to a blessed start. Thanks to both of you for leading us in this. We'll move now to the first part of the program, and I see small pictures coming up of other people joining us. Welcome, everybody. We hope that we have at least as many people today at this meeting as we have years to celebrate, 80 years. I think we will get there. So we'll start with Sister Philo Hirota. And Sister Philo, maybe some of you know her quite well. She's from the Catholic Nonviolence Initiative Steering Committee. And she worked for a member for many years of the Mercedarian Missionaries.
Jonathan, you are muted.
Well, I guess that was good.
Yes.
Sorry, I don't think I muted myself. When did I get muted?
When you are starting, before, when you introduce the Philo.
Sister Philo.
Well, I thank both of our first speakers, and I welcome the other people who've been joining as we start. Excuse me for this technical glitch. Our first speaker in this section called Memory and Moral Responsibility Now, 80 years after Hiroshima and Nagasaki, will be Sister Philo Hirota. And she comes to us from the Catholic Council for Justice and Peace in Japan, from work in Nicaragua and Mexico, from her time in Rome as a general counselor of the Justice, Peace, and Integrity of Creation, and then with the Catholic Council for Justice and Peace, and getting to know Pax Christi USA, and now being back in Japan, working with that group, and as well as the Catholic Initiative for Nonviolence. We turn it over to Sister Hirota.
Thank you very much, Jonathan.
Here we are.
After 80 years, those who experienced the terrible violence of the atomic bombs are fewer in number, while there are younger generations committed to transmitting the history and working for a world without nuclear weapons. Oops, I'm sorry. Talking about memory, it is important to be conscious of our moral responsibility regarding what to remember, how to remember, and how to communicate. The visit of Pope John Paul II in 1981 to Japan marked an important moment for the Catholic peace movement in Japan. In Hiroshima on February the 25th, he said, oops. To remember, oh God. To remember Hiroshima, to remember the past is to commit oneself to the future. To remember Hiroshima is to abhor nuclear war. To remember Hiroshima is to commit oneself to peace. War is the work of man. War is death. His words, war is the work of man, ignited the Catholic peace movement, since some Catholics in Japan believed that it was God's will that atomic bombs had been dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The commitment to peace and nonviolence consists of the mission of the Hibakshas to continue sharing their experiences and the responsibility of all of us to listen to them, which is a concrete way to denounce the evil of the mass killing of non-combatants as a crime against humanity. At the same time, we need to be conscious of the whole history of the Second World War, in which Japan's imperial armed forces massacred 20 million people in the countries of Asia and the Pacific. We are both aggressors and victims and need to ask for forgiveness and be forgiven. I insist on the importance and need of remembering the whole history, since there is a political movement in Japan right now to revise the history to deny Japan's role as perpetrator. Nippon Kaigi Japan Conference is Japan's largest ultra-conservative and ultra-nationalist far-right non-governmental organization and lobbying group. A number of the members of the Diet, especially of the ruling party, belong to the organization. Japan's colonial past and aggressive invasion have been erased from history textbooks. Before I conclude, I would like to share the experience of having been present at an encounter of Pax Christi pilgrims from the US and representatives of Hibakshas in Hiroshima on March the 10th last year. The group from the US had prepared their visit to Hiroshima for months ahead in communication and coordination with the Hibakshas organizations, since they wanted to express their apology. The draft of the apology letter went back and forth more than 5 times so that the text would be fully accepted by the Hibakshas. They met at Hiroshima Peace Cathedral. Tomoyuki Mimaki, representatives of the Hibakshas, said, "We are deeply impressed. March the 10th will be the day of reconciliation to be remembered every year. We remembered together, and remembrance became encounter. Reconciliation and confirmation of a common commitment to a world without nuclear weapons. I closed with a quotation from the apology letter of the Pax Christi pilgrims from the US. We are pilgrims of peace, seeking reconciliation for the crimes our people committed against Japan. By establishing personal right relations with you through shared prayer and open dialogue, we commit to ensuring that such human suffering is never inflicted upon humanity again by working tirelessly for the total abolition of nuclear weapons. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Sister Philo. Thank you very much for starting our session with this wonderful insight from the place that is on all of our minds as we look at this year 80th anniversary, the place where the bombs were used. We move forward now to Nicholas Mele, who is a man with an academic, diplomatic background and now pursues peace outside of government. He's served in several capacities with Pax Christi USA. He's been a member for them to the Interreligious Conference on Article 9, which is about reducing militarism and armaments. And he served Pax Christi USA and Pax Christi International as an advisor on issues related to nuclear weapons. He lives in one of the places that would be the largest nuclear weapon state in the world if it was a state, because there's so many bombs in the northwestern part of the USA where he lives. Welcome, Nick.
Greetings and thanks very much, Jonathan. I have approached this topic from the position of perpetrator, although I had not been born. Speaking about the memory and moral responsibility in the U.S., there are some encouraging signs, which I'll get to. But first, the bad news. The bad news is that many, many Americans are not even aware that nuclear weapons still exist. Those that become aware think they number hundreds or fewer. On the other hand, many Americans are adamantly opposed to war, or at least to the current war between Iran, Israel, and now the United States. That is the biggest problem those of us who work for the abolition of nuclear weapons have in the United States, the absence of citizens of the United States are very good at forgetting or trivializing our history. To give you a parallel example, most white people have no idea of just how cruel and miserable slavery was for the enslaved. In the modern era, there have been some efforts to resurrect the memory of Hiroshima and Nagasaki and the U.S. role. Just today, a few minutes before coming into this webinar, I saw a short article in one of the major newspapers, the New York Times, pointing out that the U.S. actually helped Iran start its nuclear program in the 1960s through the Atoms for Peace campaign. So how do we approach memory, and how do we reawaken memory and moral responsibility? Unfortunately, in an age when very few people read much, it has to be done through social media, through webinars, through things that give people the shortest attention span. One of the things that has worked very well for me has been to get people involved in games, games that make them think about our priorities. The Lutheran Peace Fellowship in the U.S. evolved a game where people got a certain number of beans and then allocated them to national priorities. Very few get allocated ever to defense or militarism. But of course, in the real world, roughly half of the U.S. discretionary budget is allotted to defense, and actually it's hidden, some of it. Having said that, I'm happy to say, as Sister Philo mentioned, not only are there Pax Christi members making the pilgrimage to Japan to atone or apologize, but we now have an organization of bishops from both nations. The bishops of Hiroshima and Nagasaki have paired with the bishops of New Mexico, in whose diocese the nuclear weapons were first developed, and the Bishop of Seattle, which is the state, as Jonathan said, with over 500 deployed warheads, all of which are nuclear submarine warheads. So detection is very difficult for assuming there is a war for any opponents. We have a very active Pax Christi group in the region trying as much as possible to publicize, to educate, to inform, and to inspire people. It seems like we're beginning to bear fruit. Just a few weeks ago, at this naval base where all of the weapons are, we had about 70 people, some of whom were willing to do civil disobedience and some of whom did not. But the fact is, as we're planning and thinking very hard about how to awaken America's sense of conscience so that we can indeed work on nuclear weapons, we're also exploring. I saw in the chat there are people from Pax Christi, Massachusetts here, and that Pax Christi group actually conducted a survey to see what attitudes and what involvement in nuclear abolition people have. They have about 1,000 responses as far as I know. And the encouraging thing for me is that Pax Christi USA has a very high percentage of people who are interested and informed about nuclear weapons, and also a very high percentage who are actively working towards their abolition. So on that positive note, I'll end with a prayer that the ceasefire that was announced overnight in where I live between Iran and Israel will bear fruit, although the most recent news items have not been helpful. On that note, I just ask us all to keep in mind that whether or not Iran has nuclear weapons, Iran has allies who have nuclear weapons. And indeed, one of those allies has already said it would be possible to loan weapons to Iran. We should all not only be praying, but working as hard as we can for peace as soon as we get off of this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nick. Very much. We'll go now to Speaker Anselmo Lee, I believe, has shown up. I'll speak in faith that he's coming. Yes, there's
Hey.
Anselmo. Welcome, Anselmo. I'll just introduce you briefly. You're the co-president of Pax Christi Korea and co-convener of the Catholic Peace Forum. You've got 30 years of experience, even though you don't look like you have 30 years of experience. Catholic and civil society efforts for human rights, peace, development. You're the Secretary General of Pax Romana in that part of the world, and something called Forum. Welcome very much to this session, and for you to have this on this panel.
Okay, thank you very much for this opportunity. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Dear friends in peace, this year 2025 marks 80th anniversary of atomic bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, as we all aware. For people of South Korea and also North Korea, the anniversary carries layered meanings as it coincides with the forgotten Korean Hibakusha in Hiroshima, Nagasaki, about 10% of victims are Korean. Most of them are forced labor. And memory of colonial liberation from Japan, as Sister Hiro pointed out, and also national division between North and South Korea by Cold War powers, Soviet Union and United States, and also consequently Korean War, 1950 and 53, and the long shadow of nuclear threats that still hangs over Korean Peninsula. So these are all starting from 1945, last 8 years. But this 2025 also marks several significant anniversaries for Asia Pacific. Number one, obviously 8 years of the UN, foundation of UN, and also 70th anniversary of Asia Africa Conference in Bandung, the starting of non-aligned movement, and also 60th anniversary of normalization of diplomatic relations between Korea and Japan, South Korea and Japan, and lastly, 50th anniversary of end of Vietnamese War. I think it's important to remember all these anniversaries put us into the historical context, not only 8 years itself. Today, Asia Pacific region remains one of the most heavily militarized and nuclearized part of the world. Korean Peninsula is at the heart of this nuclear confrontation. In this fragile context, mission of Catholic peace movement, especially Pax Christi in Asia, more urgent than ever. Inspired by the message of Pope Francis, since 2024, I'm sure many of you participate in this process. We have initiated the series of Catholic Peace Forum, and from Nagasaki, Rome, Geneva, and also the few weeks ago, Assisi, between these are joint initiative of Pax Christi and also Pax Romana, which is a Catholic, the student and youth movement. And also this year, we are engaging Pax Jubilee signature campaign in the name of 8 years enough for Pacific, a peaceful Asia Pacific region without nuclear weapons, in partnership with the Partnership for World Without Nuclear Weapons, PWNW, initiated by 5 bishops from United States and Japan in 2023. From the 5 years experience as a Pax Christi Korea, I'd like to share 3 observation reflections about challenges and role of Catholic peace movement in Asia Pacific region. Number one, memory and peace education. We must keep alive the memories of Hiroshima, Nagasaki, not just through commemoration, but through peace education and global citizenship education. Number two, integral ecology and disarmament. The fight against nuclear weapons is inseparable from fight against climate change and ecological degradation. So we must link our nuclear disarmament effort with a call to care for our common home, like a climate and security nexus promoted by the United Nations. Number three, youth engagement and synodality. The future of peace must be led by the young people. So we need to create a platform, forums and pilgrimages and digital campaigns where Catholic youth can raise their voice for justice and peace. And particularly, the 2027 Seoul World Youth Day can be history opportunity to build and strengthen common platform for peace led by Catholic youth leaders, particularly Pax Christi and Pax Romana. Dear friends, 8 years ago, the world stood at the brink of destruction. Today, we stand at a similar crossroad, faced with the threat of war, environmental collapse, moral indifference. But we stand with hope, especially Jubilee Pilgrim of Hope. From Korea, from Asia, from margins of global power, we need to keep raising our voice to say peace is possible, disarmament is necessary, and faith-based movement have a crucial role to play for peace building. Let this 80th anniversary be not only a time of mourning, but also time of recommitment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anselmo. Thank you. Good to hear from Korea. Our final speaker in this first section will be Bishop Brian McGee, who is the Bishop of, let me see, my English is correct here, the Bishop of Argyll and the Isles. Is it Argyll,
yes.
or Argyll?
Argyll.
Argyll, okay.
Yeah,
And
thank you.
listen carefully to this bishop because he has degrees in philosophy, theology, and Christian spirituality. He's vice president of the Bishops' Conference of Scotland and leads the work in safeguarding, interreligious dialogue, and synodality. We're hearing the word for the second time today. Welcome, Bishop Brian.
Thank you. And it's lovely to meet with you today. And just begin really by paying a tribute to the first words we heard from Japan, which and from Korea too there, and other speeches that acknowledged the complexity of war. It's not always and very often straightforward. There's always complications and ramifications afterwards. That having been said, even as a child, being aware of the effects of the atomic bombs falling on Japan, and since in adulthood reading accounts of the suffering there, it's always struck me as, you know, whatever the complexities of the war, this was not a good thing to happen. In fact, quite the opposite. And yeah, just so much suffering and pain. And growing up as a teenager, then I lived in a town called Greenock, and we had at the end of my street, looking down, we lived in a hill, and at the end of the street, we could see two submarine bases, two nuclear submarine bases, one American in the Holy Loch, strangely named, and the other British, which was Loch Long at Faslane, which is still there. The American base is gone. And we would often see the submarines. There was a lot of traffic on the river, including fishing boats, and so the submarines had to be submerged, or sorry, on the surface when they were coming in and out. And you can look at a boat, even a war boat, and you can still see the way the boat is made. There is something beautiful about it, a boat which is made well. But the submarine had no beauty at all. It just looked sinister. And of course, with the cargo it was carrying, we could know why it was sinister. It's not a thing you can say very often that a bishop's conference says anything which is prophetic. And I can see Marion there, who's also from Scotland. She'll probably say that that would be particularly true for Scotland. Yet at the same time, in 1982, yes, 43 years ago, the Bishops' Conference did indeed, long before my time, I was still in high school, did come out with a prophetic statement which declared nuclear weapons not only to be immoral to use, which the vast majority of Christians would agree with, but immoral to possess. And that was more than 40 years before the Vatican even began to say such a thing. And it's important to remember then that nuclear weapons in themselves are immoral, not just to possess, not just to use them, but to threaten their use and to even have them in the first place. We've heard a number of times over the last few days, strength first, then peace follows. Strength and peace. I would argue that is flawed. If we look at history, every arms race leads to war. The threat that we give others brings fear. Fear leads to war. By its very nature, nuclear weapons, when used, will always be massively disproportionate, both in terms of the deaths that they cause right here and now, but also in the long-term effects of suffering and of destruction. Whenever we see, particularly in the early days, and goodness knows what happens today, a complete disregard, even for the military, who worked on their development and who guarded them, never mind the local civilians, a complete disregard for their safety. There's no doubt about it, to be involved in this field demands great intelligence. Imagine the good that could be done if these intelligent people were actually doing something which was good. And then finally, the argument is used that nuclear weapons prevent death. That is false. It causes death even now. they cost an immeasurable fortune. And that money is not spent then on feeding the hungry, or helping people out of poverty, or giving medicine to the sick. How many people are dying because our nuclear weapons simply are in existence? So these are just a few of the reasons that I offer to you today why I believe that nuclear weapons always have been and always will be immoral, not just to use, not just to threaten, but to possess them at all. Thank you for all that you are doing in your work.
Thank you very, very much, Bishop McGee. Very powerful words for us at this point in the program and the 80 years that we're talking about. We have a short time now for questions to the first set of speakers. There's a question in the question chat, question and answer column. And whoever feels most moved, I hope by the Holy Spirit, will jump in there and answer it out loud. I'll read it out. NATO leaders meet today and tomorrow in The Hague. How can we prevent a scenario of having a European nuclear bomb in the future? Sent in by Paul Lansu. Would any of the speakers like to provide an answer to that question or a reaction?
Very briefly, to not allow my current president to bully them into creating nuclear weapons. That's obviously what's going on, or at least a part of it.
Okay, a voice from America warning Europe not to get bullied into having them themselves, or more of them than they already have, we should. Other responses from the panelists?
Right. So could you just repeat the question again? Sorry.
Yeah, it's gone away from the Q&A screen, but it was about what can Europe do to avoid having to get more nuclear weapons now under the pressures that it faces? Of course, we have the British and the French weapons, but are they Europe's weapons? And we've heard the French try to say, "Now you can all share in our arsenal. We'll be good to you." Father Paul pointing that turning point ahead of us, maybe.
You know, I'll add, if I may, if no one else is going to speak. One of the next speakers we'll hear is from the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons. And we all have a tool in the treaty that prohibits nuclear weapons, which went into force 3.5 years ago or 4, I can't remember anymore. But I think it's something important to call out. In Europe, there's much more support for that treaty than there is in the United States. In fact, it gets no coverage in the United States at all. But it is there. It is an instrument. And I will tell you, speaking from my experience as a diplomat, that skepticism about the Non-Proliferation Treaty is high and has been high for a very long time. Increasingly, that treaty looks to the outside world, and indeed it looked to this insider, as an excuse to allow the nuclear armed states to continue to maintain their nuclear arsenals. So that's another point of leverage, perhaps.
Which is a good lead into our next speaker. Let's just see this one more question here. On what beliefs, this is from Elena Rastello, on what beliefs could we base today the choices of complete disarmament to artisanally build peace, as Popes Francis and Leo XIV have spoken about? Thanks a lot for your answer. Any of the panelists like to hold forth on that one? What beliefs could we have today, use today, as the choices of complete disarmament to build peace artisanally, as the two last popes have spoken about?
I hate to be jumping in, but because I have spent much of my life working on promotion and development of nonviolence, I would say a belief in gospel nonviolence, which of course the Catholic Nonviolence Initiative is a campaign originating in Pax Christi International, is an excellent belief on which to base opposition to nuclear weapons and promotion of disarmament. We just should look to Jesus.
Yeah, I was going to say actually the gospel, obviously, and another one is simply dialoguing with other people. It's only when it's easy to put barriers up and see the others as an enemy. It's only whenever we meet other people we realise that they are people. it's, it's not rocket science. I want to use that phrase, but it's not very complicated, really. To see each other as brothers and sisters by encountering.
Thank you for this interaction. Our little faces are on this screen, and most of the people listening aren't even here to be seen. But we're getting into the reasons why we're here. Sister Philo, did you have a comment about this section we've just done?
No, I think I agree with the gospel of nonviolence, and I think it's very, very important to speak out. And I think I always think that number is important. So we have many people, many, but numerically, I can talk about Japan, the church in Japan. We are, I think, as the Japanese, most of us are convinced that nuclear weapons are evil and it should not exist. But that conviction is not translated into action. So I think it's very, very important that we have to sort of strengthen and our own, deepen our own belief and our own faith. But at the same time, I think the community, at the level of community, how can we really broaden and enlarge our sort of community? I think and then so in this sense, I think speaking out is important.
Thank you very much. Maybe this session could be a small help in that direction. Let's move now to hearing from the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons. Very happy to welcome you, Florian Eblenkamp, for this next part of our program. Disarmament and the role of civil society today.
Thank you, Jonathan, and good to see you all. I'm just gonna share my screen here, and you can let me know if that worked. Can you see the presentation?
Yep.
Right. So, well, thanks first of all for having me on this webinar. It's great to see so many familiar faces and also very many new names in the chat, which is of course a good sign that we're reaching a few more people. I'm going to speak briefly about the general role of civil society in disarmament, and of course, as you all expect, it will be a lot about using ICANN and the role civil society plays in the TPNW process as examples. And I think it's a timely webinar to speak about this, since looking at the world and the news that are going around, it feels a bit bleak sometimes. Huge insecurities around the world. Nuclear risks of all things are rising. There's more money spent on these weapons than ever before. There is, of course, a blatant ignorance against international law, heavy pressure on states to rearm or to buy more weapons, and more fundamentally, maybe even the trust between states is eroding, and the trust that cooperation instead of a confrontation is something useful is fading. And then I want to make the point that in a moment like this, it's especially up to us all, to civil society, to bring hope, that we can be a force of unity, that we can not just protest, but we can actually mobilize people, we can build alternatives, and of course we can shape policies in the end. That's the fundamental goal, of course. So the power of civil society has been maybe one of the greatest change makers in the world ever since. There's so many examples of this, and this picture of the Black Lives Matter protests in the US from a couple of years ago may just be one example, but of course there's many more from the Vietnam Wars, the apartheid in South Africa, the landmines that eventually were prohibited, of course also the nuclear weapons ban treaty, and general disarmament. It was always civil society that were the first to sound the alarm, because that's where the effects of these injustices are first felt. Civil society then, sounds alarm, organizes protests, connects that to political mobilization, and with such a moral clarity that sometimes in political leadership is missing, demands pressure and builds from below to change things for the better. Here at ICANN, that's one of the examples how I think civil society can work together on a very specific issue. ICANN was founded in 2007, as many of you know, in Melbourne, in Australia, and now we've grown to be more than 700 partner organizations, coordinated by a small staff team here in Geneva, where I live, from more than 112 countries, I think, at the moment. There's, of course, the one treaty we work on is the Nuclear Ban Treaty, the treaty on the prohibition on nuclear weapons. And many of you were involved in its negotiations, are now involved in its universalization and implementation. And so I hope that many of you can see why this is such a good example for what's possible when activists, when survivors, when scientists and doctors, faith groups, obviously, and even members of parliament come together across the world to demand the change that's necessary for justice in this specific issue. Currently, we have 98 states signed up to the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. That's exactly half of the world. So that's those countries that have ratified the treaty, signed the treaty, or have acceded to the treaty. And we expect that in just a few weeks, we'll have more countries join, and then we'll have a majority of the world's countries and the world's peoples, we should also say, under this treaty, just 5 years after the treaty entered into force, which I think is a significant success. And of course, testament to the role of global civil society in facilitating this implementation of the treaty. The treaty, the TPNW, is very much modeled after similar treaties on landmines and cluster munitions, and likewise is our campaign modeled on the success that these civil society movements showed in outlawing these specific weapons of mass destruction. In our work, one of the most central parts is to give voice to those who know best about what nuclear weapons are, to those who survived the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And you can see our beloved Tsuku Thurlow, who survived the bombing of Hiroshima, giving a speech at the United Nations as a representative of civil society in a space, mind you, that's traditionally dominated by governments, by diplomats who very much talk about the abstract scenarios on non-proliferation, but very rarely about what nuclear weapons actually are. Equally, it's important to give voice to those who suffer and continue to suffer from the legacy of nuclear explosions in the Pacific, in Kazakhstan, in Algeria, in Australia, and in New Mexico, where nuclear weapons were tested in the name of national defense and others, and people's lives were just considered collateral damage. Bringing these voices to the center of the disarmament debate, I think, is one of the very concrete actions that civil society took, and that civil society chose to fundamentally change the narrative on nuclear weapons. It's this, I would say, moral leadership that the Hibakusha, the survivors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, portray, that's often missing in international relations, and that, unlike no one else, has been brought to the table by civil society in this process. Fundamentally, what we try to do, of course, is to speak about cooperation, not competition. ICANN's strength, the strength of our campaign lies in the partnership. We have partner organizations from all over the world, Pax Christi being one, medical associations, youth groups, environmental rights groups, human rights groups. It's such a fantastically vibrant and diverse group of support for this that it's very hard for people that oppose what we do to argue against the legitimacy of this campaign. I also want to emphasize that collaboration in our campaign is not hierarchical. We really try to be as dynamic and collaborative as possible, and that's what brings about the best of this campaign, where we can share goals, where we can share strategies, mutually support each other, and build so much resilience against the world politics that often tries to work against us. So in a way, protesting nuclear weapons and working on nuclear disarmament is not just opposing something dangerous and immoral, but it's also about building hope, building something hopeful, which I see in this global human security and not in competition between states. So concretely, what can civil society do? This picture is taken from a statue of a tricycle that was found in Hiroshima. It's the only thing left from a 7-year-old boy who didn't survive the bombings, and his family later donated it to the Peace Museum in Hiroshima. And it's a symbol, of course, of how we try to reframe the debate on nuclear weapons in terms of the humanitarian values, in terms of human rights, in terms of what's really at stake when we talk about nuclear weapons. And through the shifted narrative, through shifting the way people talk about nuclear weapons, we build pressure on governments and try to shift policy where that's politically possible. We hold governments accountable, even in what's now a very challenging geopolitical context. These questions are just still extremely hard to answer. We've realized that change on this field doesn't always start in a parliament or at the G7 meeting, or let alone in the United Nations Security Council. But very often it starts in communities, in churches, in webinars like this, in grassroots movements, where people come together, coordinating and working together. And that's the final bit the final message I wanna convey. It's working. We've managed to get the nuclear ban through, despite all the opposition of the most powerful governments in the world. We have half of the world signed up at the moment, and more are joining soon. Nuclear weapons are, outlawed. They are also increasingly stigmatized, and we've seen that this campaign has also inspired many cities, for example, many parliamentarians, so very local movements to join. We've seen big cities such as New York City, such as I think just last week it was the Greek capital of Athens, had Rome earlier this year, speaking out against nuclear weapons and demanding the national government to join the nuclear weapons ban treaty. I acknowledge, of course, that there's a lot to do, and nuclear risks are on the rise. It sometimes feels overwhelming to work on this, but when we look at the bigger picture, I think we should generate hope. We should hope and feel stronger from the fact that this nuclear disarmament movement is actually growing. That civil society on this has never been stronger than it's now, and historically, that's maybe the best indicator for real change waiting to happen. So disarmament, in other words, it's not a fringe issue anymore. It's really something that unites people. That's part of the broader fight for justice, for human dignity, and of course, fundamentally, for global peace. Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Florian. Thank you very much. And just a note to the audience, we'll have an answer session after the next section. So what Florian has just spoken about and what's coming up now, and then there'll be time for more Q&A. We go then now to a section called Echoes of Peace, Testimonies from the Ground. And the first speaker will be Marion Pallister from Pax Christi Scotland, where she's the chair of that. And we welcome you to this seminar.
Thank you very much, Jonathan, and hello to everyone joining this webinar and to fellow members of our worldwide Pax Christi family. Pax Christi Scotland is, like Korea, a relative newcomer to Pax Christi International, but our members have long histories of campaigning for peace. However, with our own parliament here in Scotland, our own culture, and sadly the unwelcome presence of a nuclear submarine base situated on the edge of our most densely populated region, as Bishop Brian has described, we felt it was time to be Pax Christi Scotland. And we thank everyone, from our own Scottish Bishops' Conference to our colleagues at Pax Christi International, for the support which brings us together at this 80th anniversary celebration. I'm old enough to remember the Cuba Missile Crisis, and for younger generations, that was the label put on a threatening situation in the 1960s. The then Soviet Union moved missiles to the island of Cuba, just off the coast of the United States. The US leader, President John F. Kennedy, warned the Soviets off. The world held its breath as a nuclear incident threatened. Our newspapers headlined that we would have 4 minutes to live if a nuclear attack was carried out. Our school lunch breaks were spent tearfully wondering how best to spend those final 4 minutes of our young lives. We honour the fact that the situation was resolved diplomatically, but in many of my generation, a desire to rid the world of these weapons of mass destruction was born. We have in many different ways been campaigning ever since to end what our Scottish bishops in the 1980s described, as Bishop Ryan mentioned, the immorality of using, threatening to use, or even possessing nuclear weapons. Successive popes, of course, have reiterated that message, advancing disarmament, even if right now it doesn't feel that we've reached our goal. A career in journalism took me to conflicts in different parts of the world. I've seen firsthand the obscene destruction that conventional weapons can cause. And today we see how lives, homes, cities, countries are devastated by arms that are in fact more powerful than the atomic weapons that wiped out Hiroshima and Nagasaki 80 years ago, sowing the seeds for this peace movement. Pax Christi is about seeking non-violent means to end conflict. We have seen that this is possible, but we must raise our voices even more loudly with world leaders to seek diplomatic rather than military solutions. Pax Christi Scotland is small. Each and every one of us is a volunteer. We only possess human resources, and we rely heavily on the letter writers, the banner carriers, the attenders of protests and vigils, those who will write our newsletter, appear in our online events that raise awareness of peace issues. And thank God there are many such people. We also work with other organisations such as ICAN, the Scottish Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament, Justice and Peace Scotland, and Don't Bank on the Bomb. I was in Zambia very recently and recorded a podcast for our website. I interviewed the deputy head teacher of a secondary school there, who said that people think if there's no war, that there's peace. She stressed that this isn't the case, that people need many other factors to live in peace. Physically, economically, socially, and spiritually, individuals and indeed countries need so much more than a lack of conflict to experience peace. If people don't have their basic needs, peace eludes them. Pax Christi, for me, is an organization that understands this. We're not only about ridding the world of weapons of mass destruction, but in doing so, we'll free up the financial possibilities to care for people's needs, the education of their children, the care of their sick, the provision of decent homes, gender equality, real peace, the peace of Christ. Happy anniversary, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Marianne. Blessing to hear your views as we've been hearing from each person. I invite people to bring your questions to the question and answer section on the side, and we'll go into that after this last panelist is finished. Our next speaker is Godefroid Marahegane from DR Congo, member of the board of directors of Pax Christi International. And he's been a program coordinator of a national NGO. He's worked as a humanitarian field assessor, done assessments of emergency and resilience in society, and a whole collection of things. And then also helping to get DR Congo to ratify the TPNW, that half the world now, and certainly the biggest country that signed it so far, are now members of the new treaty which bans nuclear weapons completely. So we're very pleased to be with you today via this wonderful media. Godefroid, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. The ratification process of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons started in October 2021, and on September 22, 2022, 12 months later, the Democratic Republic of Congo became a state party of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, TPNW. It was a joint partnership of two international NGOs, namely ICANN and Pax Christi International, with three national NGOs, CADRE, CRC, and Agora. Strategically, we managed to meet the parliament first with an interview on the national TV. Secondly, we met the right stakeholder, Honorable Leonard Sheo Kitundu, who, on behalf of the Democratic Republic state, had signed the TPNO on September the 17th, 2017, when he was Minister of Foreign Affairs. I read of him when I was trying to understand what TPNW meant. An old classmate of mine connected me to him. Fortunately, he had already watched our interview on the national radio television the day before. Honorable Sheo Kitundu helped us greatly by recommending us to the minister in charge of ratification bill, Jose Mpanda, who was Congolese Minister of Scientific Research. Sheo Kitundu called him at once to arrange an audience for our delegation. We explained the interest for DRC to ratify the TPNW. He committed to carry the work out until the end in close collaboration with our team. We promised him to work hand in hand until the end. he wrote the ratification bill to submit to the government meeting for amendment and approval. As for procedure, any bill must be discussed by an ad hoc commission under the authority of the government Secretary General before it is presented to the government meeting. The ratification bill took too much time, and we were worried to know what was happening. We arranged an audience with the government Secretary General. We told him we were very worried about the delay the bill took and begged him to push. He kindly explained to us how commissions work. Commissions are exclusively composed of ministers only. A commission is composed of 16 ministers. It is mandatory for the commission to have a quorum of 9 ministers to meet. Due to ministers' different agendas, it is not always easy to have 9 ministers available the day the commission must meet. But following the commission meeting, there were over 9 ministers and the ratification bill was tackled. It was then presented to the weekly government meeting and from there to the parliament for adoption. But as the parliament recess approached, this ratification bill was among other files referred to the government by the parliament with temporary authorization to legislate under the Enabling Act. The government thus adopted the ratification bill and forwarded it to the President of the Republic for promulgation and publication in the official journal. The law was first signed by the cabinet director of the president. A copy was sent to me, and I sent it to ICANN. But later on, ICANN returned the copy to me and said it's mandatory to claim a document signed by the head of the DRC state himself as UN directives. The document was resubmitted for the signature of the head of state. And once signed, a copy was sent to me, and in my turn, I forwarded it to ICANN, who also sent it to UN HQ in New York to organize the ceremony. And on September the 22nd, there was a high-level ceremony when the Democratic Republic of Congo became officially a state party to the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Godfred. Wonderful to hear this hardworking, detailed story of what it takes to make this kind of progress. I think it's very illuminating for all of us. Thank you very much for your effort. And
I can add that currently the Democratic Republic of Congo has been elected non-permanent member of the United Nations Council.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. We have one more speaker, the last one in this section, Franco Dinelli. And Franco is the president of the Socioeconomic Studies Center for Peace of Pax Christi Italia. He's a researcher at the National Research Council and a member of the Union of Disarmament Scientists since 2015. He teaches a course on disarmament and arms control at the University of Pisa. And he also is active in the Bridges Not Walls campaign of Pax Christi vis-a-vis the Palestinians. Always good to combine these two insoluble things. Franco, welcome.
Thank you, Jonathan. It's always a pleasure to see you and the others. Let me first thank all the previous speakers, and I also very much appreciated the questions from the audience. With my intervention, I intend to describe our section in terms of aims and activities. Recently in Assisi, we held our AGM with the election of a new board. A new coordinator and a new vice president have been nominated. Our president, Bishop Ricuti, a very good president, I have to say, will end his service in December. Our section is thus in a period of transition. Often in this period in the past, the activities suffered a lot. However, in the past 4 years, we have tried to create. I was member of the national board before. After 2 terms, I couldn't be elected anymore. In the past 4 years, we have tried to create a structure that doesn't not dramatically depend on the period of acclimatization of the new board members. This is something similar to what happens to the new elected members at the UNSC. For instance, we have increasingly involved former board members so that to reduce downtime. The Italian section has traditionally moved according to the following principles: promoting a cultural change from aggressive to cooperative relationship in all the aspects of life, actively promoting disarmament, particularly the abolition of nuclear weapons, promoting active nonviolence as a way to peace at different levels from local to global. Our activities generally are organized with specific campaigns, and we tend to collaborate with other groups as we are small. I don't know if we are as small as Marian as the Scott section, but we are also small and volunteers. With groups that have similar goals within the Catholic Church, but also outside of this perimeter. The main campaigns we lead are basically ban the nuclear weapons, the Israel and Palestine conflict. We have also an observatory on military presence in the schools, which is increasingly a problem in Italy. I don't know if in the other section, in other countries, you have the same problem. This is a crucial point, in my opinion. Of course, promoting active nonviolence, disarming economy. And Marian also mentioned economy. It's a crucial problem. And finally, support the UN and international law, increasingly under pressure, especially after the breakup of the war in Ukraine. How we do that? We disseminate documents and books on nonviolence and UN, for instance. We form teachers and trainers with courses prevalently online. Some of the titles of these courses are Ban the Nukes, Ban the War, Artificial Intelligence for Peace. We have also a course in collaboration with the Pontifical Lateran University for postgraduate students who would like to get involved in cooperation. And finally, this is not exactly an activity of Pax Christi, but a small bunch of, I would say, pioneers in Italy. We have made a report to the judiciary for the presence of nuclear weapons on Italian territory in violation of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. This presence is due to the program of nuclear sharing with USA that recently upgraded the infamous Big 61 to be remotely guided. This is the program that Obama started in 2008, 2009, as far as I remember. Specific activities before November. November is a crucial month for us because the conference for the 8th 80th anniversary of Pax Christi will be held in Florence, as many of you know. We will reopen the House of Peace for Peace, and I hope you will be able to visit it during your stay if you come to Florence. We have in September inauguration of the archives, including former President Bettazzi, who was also president of International Section, and Tonino Bello, our beloved president. All the archives will be catalogued and made available to everyone. Then finally, we have a meeting in October, and the meeting is the aim is to find ways how to diffuse non-violence in all the different aspects of lives in Italy, from family to nationwide, to politics, to dioceses, and everywhere. We plan to make a publication similar to the one which was made before the election of the Pope. You probably remember there was I don't know if you know, in Italy we had a publication called Intra Omnes, where several experts indicated in a few pages the main goals for the future of the Church to the cardinals. I want to end with describing some problems we have and some hopes. Problems: we have a progressive reduction of the active members, which are, as I mentioned before, they are generally, we are basically all volunteers. Youth doesn't participate, they are not attracted. Probably we use an old language, we should upgrade ourselves. Post-COVID participation has reduced, though partially recovered with the webinars. Internal and external communication is difficult. It's difficult to assess the major media. It's difficult to diffuse documents, and many documents in English are very difficult to diffuse because many people don't speak English. So it is also, we don't have the strength to translate and publish many of them. We recently published a book on UNSC, thanks to Mary Jelinek, that I presently thank again many times for introducing me to this excellent person whose name is James Paul. Hopes. COVID is fading away. And so we see that people start to wake up and express discontent in various forms. For instance, the reduction of people going to vote. Now we are more or less than 50%, which is increasingly worrying in Italy, where we used to have 80%, not so long ago. Then we have rallies for many issues, including Palestine. And in this period of crisis, I believe that there is a great need of our work. It is important to organize a decent way of communication and welcoming new potential members. And we need to look forward, because this period of crisis and war will end, and we need to be ready, for instance, to promote a reform of UN. In a sense, we need to be like Roosevelt in 1939, when he started to think about the UN. Of course, he was probably more looking after his agenda, but I believe he was intentionally, in the deep of his earth, in the depth of his earth, he was looking for a place really with no war. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Franco. Thank you very much. We'll now switch to a bit of a question and answer question again with the people who've just spoken. I'll read some of the ones that have come in the question and answer section. So, Brian, thanks for your thoughts, your insights. Does ICANN also have a role in revitalizing the NPT in a moment where its legitimacy is increasingly challenged? So ICANN and the NPT, not the TPNW, but the NPT.
I guess I'm the first person to speak on this. So yeah, of course. I mean, of course, our focus is the TPNW, since we've seen that the NPT is just so stagnating on disarmament. But one of our big talking points, of course, is that the TPNW is very much complementary to the NPT. So in a way, we see that by joining the TPNW, countries are doubling down on their commitment they made under the NPT, and just empirically also all the TPNW states are also part of the NPT. So there's no contradiction here. And practically that means I was just at the NPT conference earlier this year, where as you might expect, nothing came out, but nevertheless, of course, it's good to be present and show that we are there trying to pressure the nuclear weapon states as well. And these days, where maybe the NPT is in one of its biggest crises since Iran, which is a member of the NPT, gets attacked by a non-member of the NPT, Israel, which is a nuclear weapon state, in suspicion of pursuing a nuclear weapons program, which is exactly what the NPT is monitoring. I think there's not enough being done by the NPT community to uphold the treaty, but we've been emphasizing this, right? And that this is sort of the international law that almost every country can agree on, and should be the basis for any negotiations that will hopefully follow soon. So yeah, we're working with the NPT, even though I have my reservations on how effectively it can contribute to solving this situation, because essentially the NPT is part of the solution, but also part of the problem, as it's one of these outdated treaties that give some countries the legitimacy to have nuclear weapons, but not others. And of course, that will always continue to create an incentive for proliferation for other countries. And therefore, even more so, it's time to complement this NPT with the TPNW. Thanks for the good question.
Thank you. I'll move on to another question. It's from Mary Jelinek in New York, a member of Pax Christi, active in this committee also. And she's talking about the power of images versus words, and says how the young people brought some fantastic images to New York, and what a difference they make. It's images that are searing and haunting. Might we use images more effectively in our advocacy line and invade the privacy and the memory of those who have already borne the greatest burden? Any of the panelists like to respond to that?
I think that images are always very, very powerful, but I think that we do have to be very sensitive to what is in those images, and we can't invade the privacy of those who've borne that greatest burden, but we can use images that are positive. And I think that if just an example of what I'm talking about, charities that help countries that are less well off used to use pictures of children looking very miserable and starving. They found that if they used pictures of the work that was being done and the help that was given to those children, with them looking healthier and so on, that they got a far bigger response from the people they wanted to support them. And I think that that's a lesson that perhaps we can learn, that if we use more positive images, then we might get somewhere, especially with our young people who are very sensitive to imagery. I don't know if others agree with that.
Mm-hmm. Other comments from the panelists? Yes, Franco?
I agree with Marian. I always agree with Marian. So once more.
Many of us feel the same way from the working group. Another question. The UK government has recently announced, this is from Francis Ballinger, recently announced increased spending on nuclear submarines, loudly applauded by some political parties and much of the media. How can churches in the UK teach members to stand against such a policy? Answers from the UK or from other places?
Well, I've got to say, first of all, that military spending is not a devolved issue. So therefore, Scotland doesn't have an official say in any of this. But I think that we've already seen that our bishops can make a big difference by the statements that they make. And I would very much welcome that the Scottish Bishops' Conference, and perhaps Bishop Brian would be able to come in on this, could reiterate what was said in 1982 and just make that very clear to the UK government as they start spending more, not just on nuclear weapons, but on military spending altogether.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else want to jump in on that one? Okay, I'll go to another one we've got. What impact do nuclear weapon-free zones have on efforts to eliminate nuclear weapons? Is there any hope for a nuclear weapon-free zone in the Middle East? And this is from Marie Dennis, a member of the working group. Any of the panelists like to look into your crystal ball?
No, I just make a small comment. The hypocrisy that we see recently regarding Israel bombing Iran not to develop nuclear weapons is something that, I really, it's something that, in my opinion, sometimes it's like a dream. How can people, unless they are completely ignorant of the topic, can sustain this support to Israel, unless they are like Mr. Trump, completely, I don't want to say crazy because I don't like using this question, completely under the, I don't know, control of Israel and lobbying, Israel lobbying. So I think if we could in principle eliminate the nuclear weapons in Israel, I think we could probably hope for a better world. But I have one more thing to say, is that why Iran is consistently trying to develop, because I believe they're developing, there is no other way. They probably would like to have a nuclear weapon like North Korea in order to have a deterrent situation. But why they continue? Because they know that Israel will bomb them. There is something there that I really don't understand. It's like when Hamas attacked in a crazy way Israel. They knew that the population would suffer the most. So we have to think about that. There is nothing, although Israel is crazy, in this camp they are criminals, but we have to think that there is something else there that I don't understand. Maybe there is another level that we cannot reach, where the things are decided and politicians do not play any role. Thank you.
I think excellent argument to make, that what better that the nuclear weapon Middle East needs to be nuclear weapon free is this exact circumstance, which has come up again and again, showing the complete irresponsibility of nuclear weapon states, in this case, the secret one, Israel. Okay, we have Martha Ines wanting to reply to an earlier question by David Gayo. And the questions disappeared from my list. Ines, can you tell us what the question was?
I don't see the question by Marianne.
I'm sure your answer will be good all by itself anyway.
Okay, thank you.
Please.
Anselmo wants to say something about it.
Can I make
Anselmo,
a quick comment? There's a question about nuclear weapon-free zone in Middle East, but this also issue in Asia. As you know, Central Asia, Mongolia, Southeast Asia, already nuclear weapon-free zone, But missing zone is a Northeast Asia. So there has been effort to make a Northeast Asia nuclear weapon-free zone, or 3+3 initiative, 3 nuclear power countries, that is the United States, Russia, China, Another non-nuclear countries, there's a Japan, South Korea, but not North Korea is a big issue. Now, the United States also recognizing North Korea as a nuclear power country. Officially they are saying, there are 9 nuclear weapon countries, 5 plus Israel, Pakistan, India, and North Korea. But we, South Korea, we don't recognize, we don't accept. Still we are pushing for denuclearization of whole Korean peninsula. That's why 3+3 initiative is still valid. But because of the fact that North Korea has a de facto nuclear weapon, the initiative faces a lot of challenges. So we are trying to find a way, how to continue this idea of Northeast Asia nuclear weapon free zone, Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Marta Inés?
No, I'm just to say that we continue with all our capacities, with all our means, not alone, but with other allies and stakeholders like ICANN and others in promoting not only advocacy for civil society actions, but also at intra our churches, our Catholic Church and other faiths in their capacity to move to action and to promote a more active protection of humanity in the world.
Okay. Any other final words from the panelists on the screen and those who are not on the screen? I'll offer a few closing thoughts for the session, starting with a big thank you to all the people who we've heard who've been able to reach out to us to speak. The blessing seeing so many of you in the same place at the same time, which doesn't happen very often, I don't think. And especially to our 2 presidents, Bishop Stonge and Sister Waimuyu. Really a blessing to be with you, and these kind of things never have enough time to really get anybody's wisdom and the kind of empathy we have to operate more fully, but we do our best. I'd like to thank each member, of course, also the two panels. Those of you who are familiar and those coming to us for the first time. Just a few thoughts about what I feel like the way this event was put out there as honoring the past, addressing disarmament, and building a peaceful future has come up in different ways from what you all have contributed. And there's too many to remark on, but just a few. I was struck really by the closeness of the bombs, which Anselmo mentioned, the content that goes with the wartime conflict that is still so alive in the minds of the Korean Peninsula, the people of the Korean Peninsula. We somehow have to be open to that kind of resistant memory that what we're dealing with, because as much of the world goes numb to these horrors, we feel a calling as part of our faith to try to speak up for a world that's more like the one that God had in mind for us. Bishop Brian, in your saying that nuclear weapons are not only immoral to have, but are immoral to possess, I think we can't possibly stop from saying that. There is no difference. And of course, all of us, perhaps one of the highlights of the last 10 years or 15 years was to hear Pope Francis say exactly that, and to move us all over into the land of full recognition of the challenge we're faced by, and honor the past, honor all the people who've struggled for this issue by adopting that position as well. And then that idea, which Sister Philo and others brought to mind, translating conviction into action, the depth at which we have to apply our faith. I think it's a huge challenge with this issue because, as most of you probably know from your own spouses or children or friends, many people aren't able to stay connected on this issue. It's just too depressing, too long-running, too insoluble. The worst of humanity, that we invent something that is antithetical to the life God has given us, but it also depresses us so much to be involved. So we have to rely on each other to keep our faith and our hope and our hope in a peaceful future from events like these. Just a couple more. The comment from Zambia, which was relayed to us, which we all know is true, but we don't remember to believe it all the time. If there's no war, does that mean that there's peace? Of course it doesn't. It's so much more. And who said that? An unnamed woman that Marion met when she was in Zambia. These are the kind of people we hope we can bring to the privileged position we have to sit here and talk about these big and difficult issues and to do our best to solve them. But remembering that we're never disconnected from the grassroots where this matters the most. And then the idea of, from Godefroy, speaking about advocacy as something which makes you roll up your sleeves and get involved with steps from a government which might go backwards sometime, and you have to help them to go forward and to find a new way around. This is exactly the experience many of us have. And it's great to hear it from the panel today and from one concrete circumstance where what has happened to almost half the signatories, I think, Florian can set me straight, but if 98 have ratified it, I think we're at 60 or so, 62 for signing it. So there's 30 countries in there who are stuck in the 5 years that Godefroy mentioned between when DRC signed it and when they ratified it. So that boils the task down to a specific progress that we can make together. And then maybe we end with Franco's challenge. Why isn't the Middle East a nuclear weapon-free zone? What a hypocrisy to let Israel get away with what it does. For it to have 3 or 4 nuclear weapons protectors, and for it not to be named. This is one of the biggest confusions ever wreaked upon the International Committee, and they get away with it. So maybe in prayer and with some kind of compassion, we can find ways to raise that issue resolutely and focusedly as we go forward with this latest example, this incredibly bizarre example of the last 48 hours. Ending that you can take care of a nuclear weapon by flying airplanes all the world for 37 hours and bombing a site. Will that solve it? Of course not. So it's been a great time to have this session. It's not a light topic. It's not a funny topic. We don't get to laugh very much when we talk about it. But hopefully, because of the work of all of you on the screen, all the people who helped to make this happen, we can support each other to honor the past, to also advance disarmament with little concrete steps towards the big goal, and then to really add that to the peaceful future that we try to build. With each other and with all the members of Pax Christi, and may God bless us with many more friends and companions in the efforts we make in this regard. Thank you very much. If we have
Thank you,
5 seconds of silence, we'll...
Thank you very much, Jonathan, for facilitating this conversation.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
God bless you all.
Bye, and thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hello,
Bye,
sister.
thank you.
Wayumu. Wamuyu, sister. Long time no see.
Yeah, long time.
Let's
Bye,
discuss
bye,
more about what you say, 2027. Don't forget.